Hello guys, what is going on? Dorincode here, coming to you with yet another rack extension review, and this time we're talking about the Valley People Dyna-mite rack extension. And oh boy, what have I gotten myself into. It is very, very complicated to explain this rack extension, especially in a 10-minute YouTube video, but I'll give it my best shot. So, what are we going to be working with today? This here is an audio track with a drum and bass break. And this second track right here is the a cappella of Misty Mountains.
Misty mountains go.
And they both have quite the possibilities to use the Dyna-mite on, so let's get started. Let me just minimize this track here. Okay, Sick Break is the audio track that we're going to be working with. This is the drum and bass break, and what I'll do is create a Valley People Dyna-mite rack extension. And first of all, this probably looks quite confusing with all these switches here, det mode, det int ds fm out exp gate pk. Okay, but it's actually quite simple once you know what all these mean, and you'll manage to to figure them out quite easily. Maybe also if you watch their videos and if you watch this video. So let's get started. The Dyna-mite is a dynamics plugin, which means it can expand, gate, limit, and also do a couple of other neat tricks. And I'm just going to talk you through the main features and show some of them off. So let's start by let's start with the limiter. What a limiter does is actually fairly simple. You have a threshold, and anything above that threshold will get compressed to a point where it's compressed to an infinite ratio. So nothing can cross that threshold. With the standard settings that the Dyna-mite comes in, if I reset this device, it's actually quite simple to get started immediately because they're already set up for limiting. The only thing I'll do is move the threshold all the way up so that we don't hear any effect in the beginning, but listen as I move it down. The signal will become louder at first, but then it will reach the threshold, the gain reduction meter up here will start flashing, and we'll get very snappy kicks and snares. Of course, I should mute this a cappella. So there we can hear the snappy sound. Now there's also a release knob, which will indicate the release of 20 decibels, and then you can set the amount of time it will take to release 20 decibels of gain. So I'm just going to set this to really, really short, 0.05, and this is going to really squash the signal in comparison without. And as I move the threshold down, you can hear that it immediately makes everything much more punchy and much more snappy. There are two modes of limiting here. One is the average limiting, or rather of detection. If you take a look over here, there's a detector switch. That's what the DET stands for. And there's the detection type average, which means it will listen for average loudness or average gain in the audio track, in the audio clip. And that will allow the first transients of kicks and snares and that kind of stuff to come through and to actually pass through the limiter without being limited, and that gives us this punchy effect. But if I switch this to peak, it will not ignore these transients in the beginning and start working immediately, which is great if you want to absolutely squash a signal. So now if I play it back, it will not be punchy, but be squashed. So we're getting this really, really over-compressed sound out of this unit. So those are two really nice features. It works wonders on drums, but it can do a lot more. Let's start talking about the gate. The Dyna-mite can be used in two ways for gating, and I'm going to show you those two ways one after another. So let's start with classic gating first. As you can see, I just switched the mode to expansion, and that is needed for a reason I'll tell you later. And I will set the detector to gate. And now what we can do is basically gate the signal. So if I play it back now, we don't hear anything. But as I lower the threshold, it will allow the loudest transients to come through. So here are the kick and the snare. Those are the loudest elements in this track. And then as I move it down, you can hear everything because the gate is completely open. But if you find that one spot right here. This allows you to extract elements of sorts. You can extract elements from drum loops that are the loudest. But let's say I don't want to completely cut out everything else. Maybe all we want is for the kick and snare to be more dominant and have the hi-hats and the cymbals go more into the background and make them a bit softer. This is what the range knob is for. Now, let's say we found this threshold where we can't hear the rest, but only the kick and snare. And now if I move the range knob up, we can bring in the original signal. This is the amount of gain reduction when the gate is not open. So this way, using the Dyna-mite, we can influence the balance of individual elements in this drum loop, which is actually quite an amazing feature, I'd say. So this is what an expander does. It widens the dynamic range of a signal, yeah. But this can also go the other way around. We can also set up the gate so that it only works when something is lower than the threshold. So if I turn the range back down, we can set it up so that every time the kick and the snare hit, we don't hear anything, and all that's left will be the other elements of the drum loop. So once again, I'm at this point, but I switched the detector to gate, which is where it was earlier, but I switched from expansion mode to limiting mode, and I set the limiter mode up to gate. So now everything is completely cut away that crosses the threshold. So now what we could do is, if we were making drum and bass, we could completely replace the kick and snare and just keep the percussion elements from this loop. So once again, I think this is pretty amazing stuff because you can surgically remove pieces from drum loops, which is quite nice. There are two more detector modes over here on the left where you can set up the detector source. Right now it's set to internal, which means that it will listen for the audio that comes in, and then we can influence the audio using these knobs right here. But there's also an external mode. If you switch the rack around, you'll see that there's a sidechain external input, so you can use this as a sidechaining limiter or a sidechain compressor. But I don't have to demonstrate that now because really all you need to do is hook up an external audio source, and then it will behave just like any other sidechaining compressor does, with threshold, release, and range and output. So once again, I don't think I'll have to demonstrate that, but what I would like to demonstrate is this DS function right here. And let me just delete this Dyna-mite right here, and then we've got the audio track over here, which has some vocals. And these vocals are completely unprocessed. They're pretty much straight from Aimbot's mic. So what I'll do is create a Dyna-mite, set that to bypass.
A misty mountains cold.
And as we can hear, the S sounds are kind of harsh and loud in this recording. So what I'll do is I'll set the detector from internal to DS mode. And now I'll keep the threshold all the way up. Maybe set up a loop here. And then I will start moving it down.
A misty mountains cold. A misty mountains.
Of course, I should also activate this effects unit. Sorry about that. I'm a professional.
A misty mountains cold.
So if you watch the gain reduction meter,
mountains cold.
It will go up every time there's an S noise. And this is because the detector mode here, when it's set to DS, it will only listen to the S frequencies in audio, which is great if you need a quick de-esser on a vocal and you don't want to open up huge combinator patches, set up equalizers to compressors and all that kind of stuff. But right now, all you need to do is just create a Dyna-mite and set it to DS.
A misty mountains cold.
And you have a very capable de-esser with adjustable release.
A misty mountains cold.
And once again, you can use the detector switches here.
A misty mountains cold.
To influence the way the de-essing behaves. So there you go. That was my demonstration of the Valley People Dyna-mite. It's a very hard to handle plugin, and it took me quite a while. I had to dig around in the manuals for quite some time before I understood what it actually did and what it was supposed to be used for, and until I got a feel for the plugin, or the rack extension rather. But yeah, once you figure it out, it's great, and it's a really good addition to your rack. I do recommend checking out Softube's video on this rack extension as well, because they've got a couple of explanations that are far more detailed, and also I don't think they're not as rushed as my video is, because I move relatively fast. I mean, my videos are for intermediate users and advanced users, but they explain everything in detail, and it's a really, really good resource if maybe I went a bit fast for you, this video. So yeah, once again, Dyna-mite, Valley People Dyna-mite by Softube, excellent rack extension. Definitely give it a try in the Propeller shop. And yeah, that was Dorian Code. See you next time.